Okay, now we're YouTube Live. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Fireside Chat with Dr. Yavuz Selim Sulay from Bina Business Incubator. We want to thank Qatar Fund for Development, Spark, Qatar Charity, and Bina Business Incubator for this program, and from Yıldız Technopark. As you all know, Bina Business Incubator has been working with entrepreneurs for the last 3 years, and this is the first cohort for startups with Turkish entrepreneurs. We have 96 entrepreneurs that went through an initial, review, and out of them, 59 have become eligible for pre-incubation. And from those, based on the training we're giving, about 30 of them will be eligible to go for global markets. And today we have a very special guest, my dear friend and colleague, Kathleen Durusoy. She's an amazing investment banker, an international venture capitalist, an investor with very strong people and capital network across the United States and the Middle East. She is a licensed investment banker, part of a 40-member investment banking team, which has already closed more than $300 million of deals since the start of the year. And also at Emergence LLC, a FINRA member, she's providing venture capital in debt and equity, both nationally and internationally. Kathleen is currently also a founding director at Transition Fuel Energy Acquisition Corporation, a Canadian company with a focus on acquiring natural gas assets in North America. She is responsible for bringing 100 million plus investment to the team. She is also the managing director of Simple Optimal Investments, a firm dedicated to helping post-revenue startups who are raising $4 to $20 million rounds to access funding. She was formerly a Fortune 500 healthcare manager, liaising with 43 offices nationwide, and was responsible for over 40,000 patients. He contributed to the clinical development of an electronic data warehouse that enabled her department oversight of the offices and contributed to more than 25 million every year over year revenue increases by acquisition and implementation of government contracts. Over the past 15 years, Kathleen has had diverse operational and investment experience, both domestically and across the Middle East. Her industry and investment experience includes healthcare, logistics, and commodities. She's also a multi-family investor in Turkish real estate. Dear Kathleen Durusoy, welcome to Fireside Chat. Honored to have you.
All right. Well, thank you, Yavuz. It always surprises me hearing my background. I'm like, oh yeah, that is me. It sounds very impressive, but in the end, I am a humble person that loves to connect with people and wants to help everyone I meet and leave them better. So Yavuz, we didn't also mention in that bio that we work together. So we have a U.S. Delaware corporation that we help Turkish companies come to the U.S.
Absolutely. I'm honored to say that Kathleen is my partner in the States. I'm honored to have her. So with that, Kathleen, would you like to do a presentation, or would you like to make it a informal discussion? How should we do it?
Well, I think I should introduce the startups to what investment banking is, and then happy to have a discussion where, like more of a Q&A if you wanted to start that off.
Perfect.
So investment banking, investment bankers are people that typically have gone to an Ivy League college and have worked for a large investment bank, right? So it's like a Barclays or a Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, et cetera. So they're very skilled in financial modeling, and they have a network of investors globally that they connect companies, not usually startups, but companies with capital. And generally they charge a retainer. If it's a big bank, it's quite sizable. If it's a smaller bank, it's a smaller retainer. But the other way to get into investment banking is that you just start doing deals. So I did them internationally. And then when I got to the 100 million level, I got invited to be part of a US boutique bank. As it was mentioned in the description, my bank is Emergence Investment Bank that's in Connecticut. It's a FINRA member, which means part of the regulated by the US government. And we raise capital for startups globally, but especially in the United States. So, Yavuz, have you given me the controls? Because I keep having to admit people.
Problem. Yes, you have the control if you want to show any presentation. If
Oh,
not,
that's
I will
fine.
admit it from here
I'll
as
be
well.
correcting them as they come on, but that's fine.
No problem.
Okay, there, now you're co-host. All right.
If you don't like the name, just ignore, don't admit.
I don't like the name. Now that guy sounds shady.
You can
So,
stop her from being a co-host if she's being bothered by the people. Can I stop you from being co-host?
yeah, I'm not hosting a presentation, so I don't need to be co-host.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Great, we're good to go.
Okay.
All right. Very good. All right. So investment banking is really for companies that are post revenue, and generally they have a minimum of 5 million in revenue, and they've got a decent profit margins as well before an investment banker will look at them. In the U.S., it's more like 10 million, and they're usually doing a capital raise of at least 5 million. Now, the bankers at my bank are very experienced. So I'm the youngest woman. Most of them have 25 to 30 years of experience in investment banking. So they can take a flyer, which means they can take a startup that is even pre-revenue, and work on it and just raise a couple million. And they do. And we've closed 300 million this quarter, so we're on track for $1 billion. And yeah, I'm sure that that they'd love to help some of you as well if you're interested in coming to the United States. So generally the US investors only want companies that are incorporated in the United States. So if you're in Turkey, you'd reincorporate in the United States and raise capital that way. But it's very possible. And not all of them charge retainers. Most of them do at my bank. I do, but I'm happy to make some introductions as Yavuz sees fit. And the sectors that we're in vary widely because we have 40 bankers. Personally, I'm in commodities as well as oil and gas. I have a separate oil and gas acquisitions company separate from the bank. And I mean, they're anywhere from healthcare to commodities, real estate. They like a lot of fintechs, just tech in general, software as a service, telecommunications. So, what should you know about investment banking and investment bankers? If you do sign an engagement with any of them, probably make it like a 3-month retainer and make sure that they're actually delivering, because there's also, there's people that might not do the work, right? So make sure that if you do sign an engagement, it's not for 12 months. At one point I had one of my board members leave my team for a job that didn't work out. And then he tried to start his own, signed with an investment banker for 12 months, then came back to me and said, the guy didn't do any introductions. And can I use your network, Kathleen? And I said, no, but you can be back on my team. So we tried to get one of his deals closed. And ultimately it was really difficult what he was trying to do, invest in oil assets, which nobody wants right now. And our team was a natural gas team. So we didn't close for him, but our investor did look at what he was offering. So yeah, it's an interesting industry in that the investment bankers that are good can make a lot of money for the company that they're engaged for, right? So they can raise millions of dollars, and ultimately, turn the tables as far as profitability, et cetera. And the good ones can even offer mentorship, helping the company define its brand strategy, how to do outreach. So there's a lot of good to having an investment banker on the team, but it usually comes much later than probably most of you are at right now. But it's good to know that down the road, you don't have to raise all the capital yourself. There are professionals who do that. Just make sure that they're licensed, right? Even in Turkey, they should be licensed with the regulatory authorities, because there's also plenty of people that do it unlicensed, right? And they have no background, and they'll come to you and they'll say, oh, we can raise capital, and it's just Joe Schmo and he's just a single a single person at his own company. He's the only employee at his company. That's not a good setup, and that kind of person you definitely don't want to pay a retainer to. You need people with a proven track record when you do pay for services. Something Yavuz and I have both seen in Turkey is that Turks are very reluctant to pay any money for anything, whereas in the States, people understand the value and they pay quicker. Because when you leverage, right, and generally startups need to learn this, is that you need to be able to leverage your time. You need to be able to leverage your resources. And one way of doing that is having an investment banker engaged. There are other ways too, right? I mean, even in my personal life, I have somebody else doing the cleaning and cooking for me because I know that my time is worth much more than minimum wage. So just realizing that in your personal lives and in your startups, that to be able to leverage your resources is important. Yavuz, I'm willing to take some questions now.
Absolutely. I mean, what are the sizes that you are actually looking for, for the IPO part? Because many of our startups now, they are bringing some revenue, but most of them are in their early pre-seed or seed stages. For an IPO round down the line, to let them understand the process, what should be the minimum revenue? And is it every year or for the last 2 years or 3 years? What's the opportunity to go for an IPO in the United States as an American company?
Okay, well, there's 2 options, right? So there's the penny stock exchange, like the Russell 2000, that you can have 5 million revenue. And I do know a lawyer that does that. So if I'm doing an IPO, I'm partnering with another bank on it. So I'm helping raise, but they're setting the valuation, et cetera, the underwriting. And then if you want to be on the main stock exchange, it's really more like 20 million minimum to be. I mean, that's the regulatory requirement. So 20 million revenue to do an IPO.
For the normal market, but for the other OTC market, it's $5 million is reasonable, right?
That's right.
Revenue. Okay, excellent. And there are many companies that we see, they prefer US market stock exchange over Turkish stock exchange. What are the reasons? Is it the historical performance? And especially, I know you're a proponent of the New York Stock Exchange versus Borsa Istanbul.
Yeah, so I mean, you have to go for what the investors want, right? So the investors are putting their money down in small proportions or big, or the institutions, right? As an investor, and because of the devaluing currency, the returns that they get are nixed, right? So if the Turkish currency is decreasing by 40% in a year, and some years it's more, as we've seen, then the returns, even if they're getting 22-30% return, it doesn't matter. They're losing more money than they invested.
I see. So it depends on really the return on investment, from what I understand. That's really the key.
And I mean, the world is pretty unstable right now. So I guess if you were doing an IPO right now, then you might want to put it in, like, the money that you get in physical assets, something that won't devalue. So buy a building for the company, et cetera. I mean, people don't devalue, right? So if you've got staff and especially if you're using them as salespeople, business development people, then they're bringing in more revenue.
Having said that, the brand value is also important. There are, let's say they just had a list of the most, valuable Turkish companies. Turkish Airlines is now ranking about $2 billion, but its majority is the brand value, not the actual asset. It's the same for Apple. So I think building the brand value is not tangible, but it is also a huge, value when you're entering for an IPO, I assume, because, it is still part of your, accounting process. In addition to your IPs, intellectual properties. So I think the whole, asset is very important, including the tangible and non-tangible assets as you're entering the IPO process. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, I mean, investors from all over the world invest in the US stock exchanges, and there's more than one. That's why I say exchanges. And yeah, I mean, you don't necessarily have to be a US company. I mean, as I said, it can be a shell. There's a lot of Chinese companies that try to IPO in the United States. So this is something way down the line for the startups.
That's true. That's
for
true.
most
But
of them.
yeah, at least for the ones that we are now working on, you know, the question I want to have is also, when they come as a Turkish company, should they found their American shell first or American company before going for an IPO or fundraising in the United States? What are your recommendations on that?
Yes, they should. They should, and they'd have to work with an underwriter. So that's a institution, a banking institution, an investment bank that's doing the raise, right? They're doing like a road show before the IPO. So that means that the company has met with all the investors first, and they've said, yeah, it's a soft commitment. We're going to invest 10 million. We're going to invest 5 million, you know, whatever the number is. They're typically funds, right? Like a hedge fund or a venture capital fund, PE fund, where they have a pool of money and they say, yes, we're going to fund this company when it does its IPO. But there's a way to do that in the private markets too, right? You don't have to do an IPO, and it's expensive to keep listed on the stock exchanges, right?
It is, absolutely.
So private might be the way to go right now anyways, right? So if they've got capital to pay a US investment banker that has a proven track record, that's part of a firm, that's a good way to go for raising a few $1 million of capital.
And typically a company that is having a revenue of $20 million, if they move forward, signed an agreement with you, and they start the fundraising process, the IPO process, of course, it may have ranges, but how much do you think they can raise from you know, the stock?
Well, they can easily double their you know, their valuation by going public. So I mean, that's the hope, right? Is that you are able to raise a lot of money, and that the public and the institutions see you as very valuable.
I see someone is asking a question. Bilal Uzunkash, he is with Go Healthy Nation, one of the telecommunication companies. He is asking the requirements to participate in crowdfunding, like Kickstarter, a similar one, as a startup from Turkey. As far as I know, you need to become a US company to do a Kickstarter campaign, but correct me if I'm wrong, Kathleen.
I would have no idea about that. So that's not investment banking. That's, hey, a bunch of people in the public, can you give us each $100 or $1,000? That's not institutions. So investment bankers deal with institutions. So we're the ones that get the big money. We're not talking to retail investors. Retail investor means your everyday citizen.
It has to be an institution or a family.
Yeah,
or
I'm not even allowed to. I'm not allowed to raise money from Joe Schmo. I'm only allowed to talk with people who know what they're doing. They're called accredited investors. So those are individuals that have $1 million or more in net worth, and institutions. So like a bank is one, you know, venture capital funds. That's a regulated entity.
And you're in Michigan, Kathleen. You know, for companies that want to come to Michigan, do you have any recommendations? You know, what type of companies can actually be more successful in Michigan if they want to start their company?
Manufacturing of any kind is good in Michigan. There's a lot of manufacturers here. What I see is that in our interactions, it was with Turkish companies, they know a few cities like Chicago, for example, and they're like, well, we're going to go to Chicago. And in our calls, you know, we've been like, you know, Chicago's got a 13% city tax. That means on top of whatever you earn, you're taxed by the federal government, and then you're taxed again by the city. So why would you operate in Chicago? And
Exactly.
yeah, we have a really hard time letting go of the idea that they're not going to be in Chicago because they wanted to tell all their friends. It's so funny here. They're in even an established company that's making more than 10 million revenue, and they're like, no, we need to be in Chicago. So I actually
It's
had
an
this.
obsession. It's an obsession. Well, take a ticket, travel to Chicago, but either be in the suburbs or a place where you actually can generate more value, and then share it with your investors, your shareholders, and your employees. I mean, I agree with you.
I think they know people in Chicago. Like, for example, Alchemet AD. So I was named country head a few years ago, if you remember with that one.
I do
And
remember, yes.
and they, coming into the United States, and they just, I literally met with the CEO, and he's like, no, we have to be in Chicago. And I'm like, why? He's like, I know people and I can hire them. I'm like, you don't have to know people. I mean, it's just profitability wise, it makes no sense.
Absolutely. Well, I think the movies, the culture, many things it influences, but we have to be analytical, like you said, and really see the generated value. And it's US is so vast. If someone tells me, Yavuz, I'm entering the US market, I say, yeah, but what part? Is it South Jersey? Is it New York? Is it Texas? Is it, California? What? So it's so huge, it's not easy. If someone tells me I'm entering US, I say, okay, but what part of US is the key, and with which strategy? So that's very important. Kathleen, I want to thank you. I think those are my questions at this stage. I want to thank you on behalf of all our participants. If anyone has any question, they're welcome to ask, or if anyone wants to present, they can. I know we have limited time. It's early there.
So also, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is a good one to look at too, once they're profitable. And I have partners there as well. So I'm a partner with M Strategy. They're an M&A firm that does business development. Basically, they said on a call to me recently, I'm going to go there in July. But we can fill the book of business of any size company that's able to come. So I think that's one to look at as well.
Absolutely.
It's closer. It's got a huge need and hunger for all kinds of products and services. And it might be a little easier to get into, especially for companies that don't have a lot of physical product. It's an easier move, right?
Absolutely. I'm hearing the same, especially Jeddah is totally changing, and Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is becoming a really destination in Middle East, and it's really focusing on innovation. So I totally agree with you. Perhaps for companies who wants to, be interested in entering the Saudi market as well, they can reach to you and me, and then we can see how we can, actually help them in the future.
Absolutely.
And you are traveling, you're coming to Turkey as well. I had the opportunity to meet in Turkey as well. We want to thank you. If you ever stop by in Turkey, we would love to host you and Yıldız Techno Park, Bina Business Incubator, where we trained more than 1,000 startups from Mauritania to Somalia to Libya, and now also building our first cohort from Turkey for global, and we hope to bring also unicorns to the market in the midterm. This is our excitement for many of our companies.
Very good.
Thank you, Kathleen. I know it's bright and early. I wanted to keep it small, but there is one more question. I think one of our colleagues is asking, what advice would you give to the sustainability software as service startups looking to raise capital? So it's a SaaS, and focusing on sustainability, green, energy. What are your recommendations for this type of startup to raise capital? Even though your cap is, I know, above $5 million, do you have any suggestions, Kathleen, for this type of startup?
Come to the US, make a shell in Delaware. The investors like Delaware. It's expensive to be in Delaware, as Yavuz and I know, but it's not the only option. You can incorporate anywhere. And I would say, then raise money with a banker, right? If they needed 2.5 million or more raised, then yeah, you could do that. The other thing is, Yavuz, you just mentioned a bunch of African countries. So my partners at M Strategy, one of them's a partner with Venture Catalysts, and they're now investing in Africa. So, I mean, they see 1,500 startups a month. But for example, since I know one of the partners, I just had him on the call. He's like, Kathleen, I have 80 employees. Like, I don't usually come on the call. I'm like, I know, but come to this one. And so he
That's
did.
great. Thank you.
One of our bankers at Emergence had a startup that was their baby that they wanted to help. And
Awesome.
so, yeah, I mean, certainly the African startups, that's a possibility that we could send some of the good ones their way as well.
That will be terrific. That will be terrific. I would love to, see the opportunities for collaboration there. We had one of my friends, Yasin Shine. He was in Morocco recently, and it was a vivid, area. Also, another one, Zeki Güvercin, who is the DX Senegal, board member, and he also attended different programs. There is a vibrant, community. It's fragmented. You see a good community in South Africa, a good one in Nigeria, a good one in Kenya, more developed ones versus, less developed. So there are markets to be built, there are markets to be developed, and I think Africa is definitely in our top of our list. Me being partner of an television channel, NTR TV, broadcasting to 900 million. So definitely any collaboration, I'm wide open. In terms of Africa, it's my heart. I'm very passionate about Africa, frankly speaking, Kathleen.
You know what? I never was, but I went to Cape Town, South Africa last month, and they stole my heart. I'm actually trying to hire some financial analysts from Africa right now.
From South Africa, that's great, awesome.
Yeah,
that's wonderful. Well, I want to thank you. I want to keep it short, so in the future we can also again, utilize your, valuable recommendations. Kathleen, we are really grateful on behalf of, again, Qatar Fund for Development, Spark from Holland, and Qatar Charity, and Bina Business Incubator. This program will be shared now live at YouTube as well. And I want to thank you and keep up the amazing work, and looking forward to hosting in Turkey, and also, support the great companies in the United States who want to enter the US stock exchange in the future. Thank you so much, Kathleen. We have a tradition. We all turn on our pictures and then we say, what do we say? Bridge Global, right? Arkadaşlar, herkes fotoğraflarını açsın. Ladies and gentlemen, everyone, let's do a goodbye and say Bridge Global. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Bridge Global. Thank you, Kathleen. Take care and all the best. Bye.
thank you.
Thank you.